This is a Frostgrave Ghost Archipelago battle report, but with the Star Wars theme. The miniatures used are primarily from Star Wars Legion and a few from Imperial Assault. I have converted quite a few of them to fit in with the hack-and-slash nature of Frostgrave. For the Empire, we have a Sith Lord as our Heritor, and an Inquisitor as a Storm Warden. The shock troopers are crewmen with shields, and the Sergeant is an infantryman with a two-handed weapon. The fourth crewman is an Imperial Agent with a two-hander, and the two agents are archers. The final spot is a Death Trooper with a DLT, acting as a crack shot with a crossbow. The Sith Lord is equipped with light armor and a shield. He took movement as his level 0 upgrade. I did choose all of his Heritor abilities to help make him feel like a more authentic Force user. Catch Missile represents him deflecting blaster fire. Spell Shield could be him absorbing lightning with his lightsaber. Death Strike, Iron Skin, and Stand Firm just help represent him being a more Juggernaut-style Force wielder. The Inquisitor is a Storm Warden with Lightning, Wind Walk, and Wind Blast. The wind spells represent things like Force Sleep and Force Push, and the final ability is Snare, which is a nod to Kylo Ren using the Force to lock people in place. For the Rebels, we have a Jedi Knight as a Heritor, and an Archeo Knight as an Earth Warden. The first group of Wookiees are all basic crew, 2 with shields and 2 with a pair of blades which count as two-handers. The next batch has another Wookiee crewman, again with a pair of blades, and a Wookiee chieftain that counts as a savage. The last 2 spots are for a pair of Pathfinders, which appropriately enough, count as guides. The Jedi Knight is equipped with light armor and a two-handed weapon, giving him a little more hitting power. He took Surge and Crushing Blow to define him as a lightsaber expert. He took the obligatory Catch Missile for deflection, as well as Mitigation and Steelheart. The Archeo Knight is a construct I made up to represent a Jedi who works directly for the Jedi Archives, for the purpose of collecting and preserving ancient teachings of the Jedi. Here he is represented as an Earth Warden with Projectile and Earthwall to simulate his Force telekinetic abilities, and Earth Blood and Water of Life to show he has some ability to heal. This is Scenario Number 1, X marks the spot, out of the Ghost Archipelago main rulebook. The stone with the X on it is in the center of the 3x3 board. It is represented by a computer console next to the front door of the dwelling. The goal is to spend an action and succeed at a fight roll with a target number of 14. This simulates acquiring the data stashed on the terminal. 4 other treasure tokens were placed 9 inches away from any board edge and 6 inches away from any other treasure. The Empire run the roll-off for deployment and chose the side with the 2 easier tokens to secure. The Sith Lord deployed with his 4 shock troopers, and the Inquisitor deployed with his trio of agents and Death Trooper bodyguard. The Jedi deployed in the center of his board edge with the Wookiee chieftain and both shield Wookiees. The Archeo Knight took the bottom right with a Pathfinder and a pair of two-handed Wookiees. The other Pathfinder and Wookiee deployed near the pond by themselves. As the rulebook suggests, I modified the encounter table to reflect what models I had available. All of the monsters statistically remain unchanged, only the model used to represent them is different. For example, a tiger is now a Nexu, but it is still statistically a tiger. A crocodile is now a Wampa, skeletons are now B-1 battle droids, and so on. As for the starting forces for this scenario, I rolled up 3 Dritchian warriors. They are now represented by 3 Rodians. On turn 1, the Empire won initiative and both Heritors double moved towards the primary objective. The Warden phase saw some immediate action, as one agent moved to higher ground and put some unobstructed and accurate fire on the Wookiee chieftain, wounding him. His fellow agent put the chieftain down while shooting on the move. Not to be outdone, however, the lone rebel Pathfinder Sergeant snuck around the far side of the pond and dropped the unsuspecting trail shock trooper with a fine shot. The creature phase showed just how good a Heritor can be. The nearest Rodian charged the Sith Lord, who took the opportunity to countercharge when the Rodian was 1 inch away, getting him closer to the objective. With a lower critical hit threshold thanks to powering up Death Strike, the first Rodian was sliced in half. The next Rodian then charged in, and again the Sith countercharged his 1 inch, with the same result, a non-natural 20, but yet good enough to power up Death Strike, and the second Rodian takes a lightsaber to the face. The third Rodian, who previously would have charged the Jedi as he was the closest, now had to charge the Sith, since his little countercharges got him a total of 2 inches closer. At least the third Rodian did better in that he was not killed outright by the Sith, He was down to 5 health, but at least that did not leave him in the wounded state. You will notice I have some Legion tokens on the board. I've removed defeated miniatures at the end of the phase, but I will leave a token to show where the bodies are. This has no in-game purpose, but I like the visual representation of where the combat took place on the field of battle. At the end of turn 1, each side had lost a trooper to enemy fire. The Sith Lord is within 1 move of the objective, but there is the final Rodian between him and his prize. The Wookiee swordsman waded through the pond to be close enough to move and secure his treasure next turn. The agent in the north did much the same, with a double move behind the vegetation, also able to move and secure his treasure next turn. Turn 2, and the initiative stays with the Empire. Unfortunately, the headstrong Sith, who is faster than his shock troopers to begin with, is now too far away to command his squad to move with him because of his repeated countercharges against the oncoming Rodians. So he activates alone, and although he outfought the Rodian, he could not land a blow. The Jedi took full advantage of the delay, tapped into the Force, and with a surge of speed allowed him to move to the console, pass the test to access the data, and then use his bonus third action to seize the prize. This does trigger a pair of Erythraeans, represented by Gamorrean guards, to arrive just out of line of sight and 6 inches behind the trail Wookiee, who was detailed to pick up the treasure. In the crew phase, the remaining shock troopers move up and finish off the final Rodian. At the end of turn 2, we see the primary objective picked up by the Jedi, spawning the Gamorreans. We also see both Wookiees pick up their treasures, but only the lone agent was able to grab his assigned box for the Empire. All 3 of these subsequent grabs did not trigger any further encounters. Instead of picking up the box in front of them, the Inquisitor and his band decided to focus fire on the Wookiees in the center before the shock troopers crash into them. This fire is largely ineffective, but the Pathfinder next to the Archaeonite almost one-shots the agent he can see around the edge of the trees, reducing him to only 2 health. Turn 3, and the Empire still has the initiative. The Sith moves in to engage the Jedi on the primary objective. Things go horribly wrong for the light side when the Sith strikes the Jedi for 9, and when the Jedi tries to use the Force to mitigate the damage, down to 6, he fluffs the roll and instead increases the damage, taking up to 12. The Wookiees are doing their best to hold the line against the shock troopers and keep the Jedi's flank secure, but they lose all down the line and are pushed back. 2 of them are now even wounded and have diminished fighting capacity. All does not go the Empire's way, though. The Inquisitor picks up the last box, which again fails to spawn any random encounter, and then exchanges lightning against blaster fire with the Pathfinder Sergeant hiding behind the building. The Sergeant lands a solid shot in the Inquisitor. The Archaeonite uses the Force to mend some of the wounds to the Jedi, and then turns around to see what his Wookiee companion is screaming about behind him. He immediately charges into action against the nearest Gamorrean with his second action. The Pathfinder follows suit, but instead he slams into the farther Gamorrean facing the encumbered Wookiee. The Pathfinder wins the fight, and although he deals no damage, he pushes the Gamorrean back in such a way that he will leave the Wookiee alone and instead face him. In the crew phase, the Wookiee treasure carrier finally climbs out of the pond and is home free to his board edge. The Imperial Agent is likewise 1 move from making it back to his ship with the treasure. The other encumbered Wookiee, with the aid of the Archaeonite, lands a parting blow on the Gamorrean still engaged with him. Instead of pushing the Gamorrean, the Wookiee retreats 1 inch towards his own board edge. Disaster strikes during the creature phase, when the wounded Gamorrean, now focused solely on the Archaeonite, attacks him with all the savagery he has left. Even though he is near death, they tie with some impressively high rolls on both sides. The Archaeonite was only slightly weakened from using the Force to heal the Jedi, but nevertheless he was taken out of action with a single blow from the Gamorrean. At the end of turn 3, the middle was still up for grabs. The Sith is steadily chipping away at the Jedi, but mitigate is keeping him alive just barely. The rebels were assisted by the Death Trooper shooting into a 2 Wookiee on 1 Shock Trooper melee. Despite the odds, however, the Death Trooper obliterates his own trooper in the back with his DLT. Turn 4 dawns, and the Empire maintains their initiative streak, yet again. The Jedi still holds the primary objective, but he's barely standing. While the Force users concentrate on each other, they still have enough situational awareness to defend themselves from the troopers unwise to try and interfere with their duel. On the left flank, the sneaky Pathfinder Sergeant threads yet another shot into the middle, this time blindsiding the Shock Trooper Sergeant. With the fate of the primary objective still very much in doubt, a fresh Imperial Agent moves into position in the middle to assist. The Gamorrean and Pathfinder continue to struggle with each other, with neither able to get an edge over the other. The Wookiee treasure carrier takes advantage of the situation and starts hopping fences to make it off the board. Turn 5, and the rebels finally gain the initiative. However, this turns out to be a huge drawback as the Jedi is soundly defeated as he duels with the Sith. The primary objective drops where the Jedi fell, but the Sith ignores it, chooses to chase down the Wookiee treasure carrier running back to his ship. The Sith bypasses the last Wookiee struggling with the wounded shock trooper sergeant, and 2 moves later he's right on the heels of the encumbered Wookiee. Slowly but surely the Inquisitor finally makes it into the middle with his treasure in tow. Having taken 2 good shots from the pesky Pathfinder Sergeant on the flank, he is risking losing that treasure should he fall. In the end it works out well enough. With the help of the last shock trooper, the Inquisitor defeats the final Wookiee. Back on the road, the other Pathfinder blasts the Gamorrean point blank after backstepping from last turn's combat. In the creature phase, the last Wookiee on the board runs for all he's worth towards the freedom of the board edge, but the Sith is right there behind him, and he knows he will have to face him at least once before he can make it away. The Pathfinder Sergeant continues his guerrilla warfare by poking around the vegetation just enough to see the lead Imperial Agent. The Sergeant proves his worth yet again, taking a fresh agent from full to wounded in 1 shot. Back in the middle, the wounded shock trooper sergeant takes his one action to step over the fallen Jedi and move to the primary objective, ready to pick it up next turn. Turn 6, and the rebels win initiative, but it doesn't matter all that much since both of the Jedi are out of action. The Sith Lord charges in and engages the encumbered Wookiee standing on the board edge. If the Wookiee wins, he can disengage off the board to safety. Unfortunately for the rebels, the wounded and encumbered Wookiee is no match for the Sith, and he falls, dropping the treasure at the feet of the Sith. Back in the middle, the shock trooper sergeant picks up the primary objective, and the Inquisitor calls lightning on the Pathfinder Sergeant. After doing so, he wisely shelters in the Rodian hideout. In the creature phase, the Pathfinder Sergeant realized the battle was lost, and he disappeared into the scrub off the board edge. This was the wisest course of action, since he not only avoided the impending force lightning brewing overhead, but he also forced a roll to claim the treasure sitting at the Sith Lord's feet, instead of simply allowing him to pick it up next turn. So the game ended, and the roll failed, and the last treasure went unclaimed. So there you have it, an Imperial victory, 3 treasures to 1. The Empire had no injury rolls to make, since their only casualties were shock trooper crewmen. Thanks to the optional +2 for the central treasure, the Empire got a map fragment, along with some magical light armor and some extra gold. The rebels had the Wookiee chieftain and fallen Pathfinder return to duty, as did the Jedi Knight. The Archeo Knight, however, picked up a niggling injury, and with the only loot being a bunch of herbs that need to be sold, the Archeo Knight will have to start the next game a little hurt. He can use the Force to mend his injury as soon as he steps onto the board for next game, so that's not that big of a deal. The Sith Lord and Inquisitor managed to advance quite a bit, but for the rebels, only the Jedi earned enough to improve his stats. Well, I hope you enjoyed this battle report. As you can tell, I'm an absolute fan of the Frostgrave game engine, and I really just wanted to find a way to put my old Imperial Assault models to use with the new Legion stuff. This straight skin of Ghost Archipelago seemed to suit my purposes quite well. Thank you for watching, and if you have any suggestions, please leave them in the comments below.